Did you know Higher Ed's premier tech conference, Ellucian Live, is almost here? Join industry leaders in New Orleans, March 26th through 29th. Discover insights and game-changing solutions to unlock possibility and drive student success. Register at elive.ellucian.com.
Epic.
3 higher ed authors, 100 plus college and university presidents, dozens of actionable insights for academic leaders. Commencement, the beginning of a new era in higher education, is now available on Amazon. Welcome back, everybody. It's your time to EdUp on the EdUp Experience podcast, where we make education your business. Dr. Joe Sallustio back with you again as we fast approach 600 episodes of this podcast. It'll be 3.5 years probably when we hit that number. And we are almost at 250,000 downloads, which kind of feels like a 250,000, kind of feels like a kind of an accomplishment. But I'm like, can we get to 300,000 by summer? Could we get to 350,000 by the end of the year? Maybe more, 400,000. I don't know. But it keeps growing and growing thanks to you, the audience, the listener. We cannot do this without you. Actually, we would not do this without you. Nobody would want to talk to me at all if you didn't listen. So thank you very much. And of course, if you've picked up a copy of Commencement, the beginning of a new era in higher education, I want to doubly thank you. We really appreciate your support, Kate Colbert, Elvin, Freytes, and I. We worked really hard on that book, and really appreciative of those of you that are using it, and I hope we can bring some insights. Of course, you can bring us to you if you want to. We'd love to come speak about it, and so on and so on and so on. But I won't belabor the point because I do this now on every episode, but it does warrant thanks for your support. Now that I've gotten through that part, I was telling my co-host here today and my guest that, shortly after this, I'm going to head down to Qdoba or Chick-fil-A, which are downstairs in my building here. And literally, I have one of those two things on my mind as I'm talking right here because I'm hungry. But we got to get to this conversation right now. It's been in the works. It is a timely, relevant conversation that we need to have. But before I get to timely and relevant, I want to introduce my co-host. No, I wouldn't. Everybody, it's Douglas Carlson. He's back again. He's head of business development, partnerships, and strategy at LeadSquared. Douglas, what's going on?
Oh, man, I strive to be both timely and relevant, so thank you for that.
Yes. I really appreciate you. In fact, I also strive to do those things, and your title is always a challenge for me. It is timely, it's relevant, and this is, I think, the first time I've gotten it correct. You
nailed it. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. I've been practicing. Actually, when you're not here, I do practice it. I say, Douglas Carlson. No, I don't do that, but it would be funny if I did. All right, let's get to our guest. We've been waiting a while to talk to him. We're going to bring him in right now. Here he is. He's Pat Cassella. He is Executive Director of the United States Distance Learning Association. Pat, what's up?
Hey, Joe. Hey, Douglas. Nice to meet both of you guys.
How are you?
Doing all right. It's a Friday, and I'm heading to Cabo tomorrow, so it's a beautiful day.
Well, we're kind of honored that before heading to Cabo that you take an hour out of your day and talk to us. That's very nice of you in the middle of packing, I'm sure, or a glass of wine. I'm not sure which, and you don't have to say. Tell us, level set for us, Pat, for those that don't know. I guess if you work in the online space at any level, you'd probably know the U.S. Distance Learning Association, but let's assume somebody doesn't know. What does the USDLA do, and how do you do it?
Yeah, no, great question. So association's been around for over 35 years. In the early days, it was developed essentially to help people get through video conferencing, right? How do you set up a video conference? What equipment do you need? What preparation do you need for doing distance learning? And it's the reason USDLA. And times have changed. The association has changed as well. We just celebrated our 35th year last year, and we're going strong here. We're stronger than ever.
Amazing.
35 years. What a difference a 3-year time period also makes, if you will. And we're seeing, obviously more and more schools investing, growing, trying, failing with online learning, distance learning in its many forms. What's the state of education today, Pat, amongst your membership? What's the conversation like? Let me start there, because you've got a conference coming up, and I'm going to ask you to plug that conference later, and I'll probably plug it too. But what's the state of distance learning online education today?
Yeah, a lot of changes. As you said, 3 years ago, things were just kind of cruising along. Then the pandemic hit, and boom, it's like we've been preparing for this moment our whole lives, right? And folks did continue to turn to us, although we moved from that, in person where we got to touch each other and get close personal contact. We went to a virtual mode, using the technology that we've been promoting for, better part of almost 4 decades now. But some of the challenges, were you prepared for the pandemic? That's probably one of the biggest challenges, biggest questions, that was out there. And some were, some weren't. As the ones that had the pull this lever only in case of emergency, well, they might have been a little bit rusty when it came to actually using the equipment, right? But there were others that they were just well prepared because it was part of their everyday workflow, and they were waiting for that moment. Right? We'll talk all different constituents, but the higher education, for the most part, they were far more prepared than our K through 12 schools, as you can imagine.
True.
I was talking to somebody earlier today, and we were talking about learning loss. K-12 certainly felt the biggest brunt of that, right? When you're kids, if you have kids, that was, I think back to those days. I have 2 little kids during COVID, and the work from home, be online. I had I think she was 7, my daughter, and what a nightmare that was for children at that age. Where I was in my doctorate, and I was like just chugging along because I was in an online doctorate. Have we pulled together more? Have we started an adoption cycle where we say all of us need to have some investment in online learning, even if it's a underlying, you said pull this in case of emergency, but maybe it's something that is more flexible, maybe not used as much, but more flexible, but we're planning for it. You're seeing the emergence of AI now. We can have that conversation separately, but can you avoid it? And so do you think there's just, I don't know, more widespread adoption and acceptance, or do you think there's still resistance and lack of knowledge?
Yeah, definitely in the lower education, the K through 12, they're still very political, right? Some states, they wanted you to be in the classroom. Other states, hey, remote and distance learning is just fine. But the reality is we should be training our students in that K through 12 market to be prepared for college. And college, as we've all seen, it's going more and more towards an online flexible model. Even if you're brick and mortar, you still have to have some kind of a component on the online side of things, or else you're going to be left in the dust. I mean, that's the reality.
Douglas.
Yeah, well, and to loop back something you said a little bit earlier, I think one of the really unique things about the USDLA is you're not focused in any specific niche. Like you're across the spectrum, K-12 all the way out through college. I'm curious, what insights are you seeing spanning the entire universe versus just looking at college or just looking at K-12? Like you kind of have this holistic view. So I'm really curious the things that are standing out for you in sort of the online space. And I realize it's a broad question, but I'm just kind of curious.
Yeah, no, it's a great one. And our members are actually across even a broader spectrum. We have telehealth. We've been really focused on that for several years. And that actually was leading deployment of distance learning and virtual, video conferencing equipment and whatnot way back. You're going, again, 10, 15 years ago, and that even took off during the pandemic, right? You saw more and more doctors starting to go and pivot towards telehealth, which was really smart. Training, we say distance learning, it's not just for the K through 20 market, it's really the corporate market. They also have to, think about it. Gee, I couldn't get everybody together. I also have to have the ability to train my folks, keep them up to date, let them know what's going on. So our membership, it really does go across education, government, the corporate side, as well as the healthcare side.
And can you speak to a little bit more, like what, at least my understanding, and this is, please educate me a little bit here, is what you're doing is basically giving a sense of quality of a program versus necessarily like an accreditation or something of that nature. Can you speak a little bit more to that?
Yeah, no, that's really good. So, in the early days, it truly was, we would work with partners, your typical, your Polys, back then, your Tambergs, your Ciscos, anybody that had equipment that was necessary to set up and do video conferencing. And, we were always there to help bring all these folks together, right? All these different manufacturers and equipment providers and whatnot, and kind of allow them to demonstrate best practices on how to actually get something done for those who were the customers. And again, at the time, it was heavily on the K-20 side of things, but predominantly in higher education. And, now it has really shifted even more towards, hey, how do you use the technology appropriately? Not setting it up and getting it to work, but anybody could set up a Zoom call, right? Where you set this thing up in 2 seconds. But how do you actually use it? More of the pedagogy side of things, right? If you're doing a hybrid class, what equipment do you need? Where should you be standing? Who should you be addressing? Is it purely virtual? Purely virtual is a lot easier. Sitting in back of a desk, you don't have to worry about getting up, moving around, having physical people in the room. So, these are the things that we help our members and help the public in general understand what are the best practices today for doing so. And I know Joe mentioned our conference is coming up, which it is in Orlando, the week of July 17th. And this is where the folks come from all across the world, not just the United States, to see those best practices and hear what others have to say on, hey, what's working right? What are some of the challenges? What's working wrong? Where are the improvement opportunities, et cetera?
How do you plan out this conference, Pat? Because, there's so many there, you're talking about a 3-day conference. You're talking about, like Douglas said, this range, you have K-12 all the way through higher education. How do you plan sessions that are going to hit the right things for that span of users, right? Because you've got so many different types of users, adoption levels, biases, opinions, thoughts, concerns, so many things. And because you're so segmented, planning a conference seems like a really big lift to hit all of those things, or at least some of them, for each type of stakeholder, and you have many.
We do. And literally, as our conference ends the year before, we immediately get back to planning for the next one, right? The topics change, and you've seen it as well. We try to stay relevant with different topics as we do our call for proposals, which is open right now. And that's where we just look for the best of the best in the latest for proposals for different topics. AI, for example, leadership, flex learning, you name it, put out the top topics that are out there. And those are the presentations and the sessions that we're looking for. And then we kind of like divvy it up a little bit. While there's commonality, across, there's a base level that's common, that's going to be across all our constituents. There's no doubt about that. And then there's some specialty items. So, we're trying to get more and more towards K-12 because, again, we feel that students should be well prepared when they get out of high school to go on to college and have that distance learning experience, that online learning experience. And some of the schools are really, they're not preparing the students, let alone preparing the teachers to teach it. That's a whole nother topic right there, right? So yeah. we do try to fine tune and make sure that there is something for everyone there. And these are smaller conferences. This isn't your 20,000, 30,000 mega conference. These are less than 500 people. And that's what they want. They want that personal networking experience where they can work with like-minded individuals that can help expand their knowledge through that broader base of their friends, friends that they haven't met yet. That's what they're looking for when they come to the conference.
Epic. Can you talk about the chapter system a little bit? How there's some state chapters.
Yeah.
How do they create a state chapter? Does every state have a chapter? How does that all roll up to the parent, so to speak? Can you talk about the organizational structure so we can get our arms around that?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And chapters have changed over the existence of USDLA. We still do have active chapters. Florida, for one, is going to be in Orlando, obviously. It's right in their own backyard here. They're a very active chapter. Tennessee has a chapter. We have the Northeast Distance Learning Association, which is very broad, covers Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Delaware, and then all the way up north, heading up into Maine. And then there's also the Ohio Distance Learning Association, another active chapter. And over the years, some chapters become, more active than others, but USDLA has long been there to help them from what we're learning, and to also hear some of the feedback. There are eyes and ears in the state to hear feedback on what are some of the challenges at their level, at the state level, right? Because we all know each state is a little bit different on how they handle distance learning, especially in that lower education, the K-12 market there. So it's a really good partnership where we can provide something, they can provide something to us, being the eyes and ears within their individual states.
What are the state topics for the chapters that you have, or the state topics of distance learning typically the same that you're talking about at the national level? Are they really state specific? And there's a three-pronged question, as I like to say it. So state specific or national, and then are they by state so different from each other?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. There certainly are, as any state has, they treat certain things differently, and online education is one of those items, right? So there is that, from state to state, there's those issues that they want to talk about affecting them directly. Then there's the, hey, distance learning across the board is pretty much the same, right? We're going to do it the same whether we're in Montana versus we're in Maine or New York or California or wherever you are, right? So there is that commonality, and the challenges are certainly common across all the states of what is happening at the national level. And then we do a good amount of public policy awareness, right? And that is something that we used to, prior to the pandemic, we used to go to DC for a week towards the end of the year, and we used to go and talk to some of the representatives about what are some of the challenges that we're seeing and hear what's on their minds. That is something that, again, like us all, it kind of got lost a little bit over the last few years with the pandemic, but we are looking to get that going again. And, now, much like we're preparing for the conference with topics, and we had to go out and find speakers and, the location, et cetera, we're also doing the same on the public policy side, right? We're looking now at all the issues across the country and the world and seeing, what are the ones that are near and dear to our heart, that we can help take up the cause. Broadband connectivity, if you haven't heard that, 10 times a day, every time you turn on the news, it seems to be something that's first and foremost in front of you.
Yes.
That is certainly a hot topic right now. There's no doubt about it.
Go ahead, Douglas. I see that you're trying to.
The wheels are turning here, huh?
let me set you up the right way.
Now it's your turn.
Well, thank you. Well, and I was really curious, like, the moment you said that, I was like, all right, what are the topics? And broadband, I don't want to, it's such a challenge, and I want to say it's obvious, but it is the one that it's not an international problem, it's a US problem. There's plenty of rural areas and even some urban that lack that access. So that's certainly one. What else is on your tick list? What else are like the big items that you really want to advocate for, that you're hearing your base talk to?
Common instruction principles and whatnot, and open educational resources, right? That's a huge one, right? Making sure that there's a common set across the entire country, much like there should be common broadband access across the country. You want to make sure the educational resources that are available are made aware to folks. There's a lot of people that just do not know what's available to them, right? Even on the grant side of things, that is another area that we have an incredible grant writer, Kristen DeProspero. She is on our board, our executive board, and she is one of the best grant writers for distance learning and online learning, both in the educational space as well as the telehealth space, right? And that is a grant that actually, one of them is called the RUS grant, Rural Utilities and Services, that helps these areas you mentioned, Douglas. These areas that don't have broadband. I've traveled to them. Some of them don't have electricity and running water. Yeah, this is in the United States. People don't realize how rural some areas of the United States are. And these grants that are out there will help provide connectivity to those areas, because let's face it, if you're in a village in Alaska, which I've worked with many, Sometimes the population's 100, 100 in the village. So, you have to have the ability to take those instructors who just might not be willing to go live in a village of 100. All right. There's people that don't want to do that.
Yeah.
Right? And you want to make it so that they can go and teach as a distance. So, one of our, something that's near and dear to our hearts is certainly equality in the online learning space, right? And that there's many different tentacles that go off of that, but that is one of the areas that we're really focusing on right now.
Ladies and gentlemen, can I have your
Attention.
It's time for us to solve the puzzle of success in higher education. Get your ticket to Ellucian Live for industry insights, powerful connections, and innovative solutions. From March 26th through 29th, join peers from around the world in New Orleans to unlock the possibility and drive student and institutional success. Learn more and register at elive.ellucian.com. You know that the world of higher education is experiencing evolutions and revolutions. You want to be part of the progress. Commencement, the beginning of a new era in higher education with insights from more than 100 college and university presidents, will show you how. Get your copy of Commencement, the beginning of a new era in higher education now on Amazon right away. We think you're going to love it. It's
Amazing.
Are you finding that non-terrestrial based internet access, i.e. satellite internet, is making a dent in a lot of this, so you don't have to actually run fiber out there? Just curious if that's obviously a relatively recent engagement, but is that helping?
Oh yeah, you can see the trends across the world, of having access there, no doubt about it. And even in cases of emergency where, look what's going on in Turkey and Syria right now.
Yeah.
And, an entire infrastructure just got wiped out. So yeah, you're going to depend upon satellites and terrestrial. It has to, right? That's going to be a key component right there. So yeah, it's making a dent in it for sure. No doubt about it. And even the broadband, capabilities that we're starting to enjoy at our house, just think back 10 years ago, and if you had a 10 meg connection to your house, you might even call it high speed. And then it, got up to 50 and you were, the envy of the neighborhood. Now I think I have like an 800 meg connection to the house, right? Everything's getting to be closer to a gigabit per second connection. We take it for granted when we live in these areas that are well developed, but that is a luxury out in these rural areas, right? You're still
That's
happy
a fact. That's a
yeah,
fact.
that's it. You're happy to chip away and just get a little bit of broadband so that you can do a level of distance and online learning from afar.
Is there any irony in the fact that while you guys were talking about internet access, my internet access went to unstable, so I've had to go off of cameras for the record. So sorry to pipe in there and give you that fact. Douglas, go ahead.
Yeah, it's deeply ironic, actually. So I'm also thinking like some of our podcast listeners may be, they're really a broad range here, but like thinking about kind of maybe the college professor that has taught online taught in person rather for most of their career, and now is being asked to transition to a hybrid or take on an online course. What advice do you have for them? How do they think about it? Like they're obviously very pedagogically inclined, and it sounds like that's really a big value you provide. So I'm curious what advice you would have for them or how they should think about it.
Boy, that's one where I turn to the expert like Joe. He just wrote a whole book about this, right? And to talk about politics, people are worried, hey, are you taking my job away? Number one is kind of like the analogy of when we had self-checkouts at the grocery store. All right, there go the cashiers. But yeah, there's a lot of concern. One, just because you're a great instructor in class doesn't mean you're going to be a great instructor in a hybrid environment or an online,
100%,
virtual environment, right? Yeah, they're not taught to do that. And quite honestly, even our teachers nowadays, starting to see pockets of getting these micro-credentialing certifications and whatnot. And that is another area that we're really growing at USDLA is our credentialing. Somebody wants to teach online. It's not like we can give them, formal degrees and whatnot, but when they come to us and say, can you show us the right ways to do online and distance learning? That is something that we're really good at doing. So yeah, these instructors, they're nervous about it for sure. But, it's like anything. The first time we all jumped in front of a camera to do a video conference, we were probably a little bit nervous. Practice.
Right.
Yeah, right. Give it some practice. Sit in front of it without a live audience at first and get yourself comfortable and whatnot. And hey, don't look at yourself on the camera. Look at everybody else that's out there. But yeah, there's a lot going through their minds as an instructor these days, no doubt.
Well, and to build on that a little bit, I think a really important point is you could be a rock star in-person instructor. You can stand in front of 500 students and just be amazing. Can you speak a little bit to like the skills that are different that would be helpful to know and learn to be successful in a hybrid and online environment? Maybe there's the same, but I suspect that a hybrid environment probably has a slightly different skill set than purely online.
Yeah, you hit it.
Before you answer that, I have to ask you to add into Douglas's question. Do you think that amazing faculty brick and mortar realize that they're not amazing in the online space, or you have to tell them, and do they accept that?
That's you for Douglas, isn't it? That for you?
I don't know if I'd touch that question with a 10-foot pole.
You can't handle the truth.
It is, though. You think about, and I mentioned this, for one, hybrid is really harder to do than purely virtual. I'll just say that, okay? Even if you're good and nailed down the virtual side of things, and if you're like me, you like to be very personal with people, work the room, walk around the room, get in front of people, engage people. I think that's really important. Some instructors might feel a little challenged on how do you do that in a virtual environment, because you're looking straight at the camera and you're not exactly looking at Douglas or Tom or Joe or anybody in particular. So I think there's that. Am I getting them? Because, when you're personal, you could read a room. You can see what's going on when you come right up to their eyes. It's a little bit harder to do on the virtual side, number one. And a hybrid environment is even harder, because now you've got to pay attention not only to your brick and mortars that are in front of you physically, but you have to work and keep in mind that you have virtual people. So you've got to keep the whole environment engaged, not just your physical pupils that are in front of you, not just your virtual audience. You've got to make sure everybody is engaged. So again, back to pedagogy and different methodologies on how to do so. You're probably using a little more of polling, any kind of quizzes that go out there. Online polls, I think, are certainly important. And it's sometimes hard to do just by yourself. Some online learning programs, you'll see there's somebody like a moderator or somebody in the room to actually give them a hand. And I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, and those are so helpful. And even in the experience of sort of the business world, the hybrid meeting is the hardest meeting. And I think that of the three different options, the hybrid teaching methodology is by far the hardest. So I'm glad there's more thought going into that. I'd be curious if you think that being the hybrid environment is sort of the way of the future. Is everything going to be hybrid? Or do you think there's some bifurcation where some stuff will stay in person, other will go online? Tell me or read your crystal ball for me.
Yeah, right.
Let's start the insanity.
I wish I could. Here's the thing where it's, a 50-plus-year-old's mind versus a teen's mind or a 20-something-year-old's mind, right? And they learn a lot differently than we all did back in the day. They're more, hey, I want it immediate. I want it on my terms.
Mm-hmm.
Here's going to answer your question. I want it on my terms, which means one day I might feel like getting off my butt and going out into the physical classroom and sitting in on it. And one day I might not even want to take it when it's live. I want to take it on demand later on that night because I'm busy. I'm going out surfing for the day or something. This is reality, right? These kids, students, leaders of the future, they want flexibility. So, to answer that question, I think you're going to need a flexible model, which is truly that hybrid model. And as Joe would, we've had conversations, it can't necessarily just be a bolt-on module of one size fits all. I think it has to have a little bit of customization depending upon what you're doing, depending upon what you're teaching. I have a sister who's an organist chem teacher. And what are you going to do? Go send a kit to the house of chemicals and beakers and stuff? And all right, we're going to do lab today, everybody. You have your fire extinguishers ready? Think about it. There are certain areas that there's just not going to be that virtual substitution for teaching. No doubt about it.
We interviewed, Douglas, were you with me? But might have been you. We interviewed, oh gosh, he was like the chief marketing or chief enrollment officer for one of the aviation schools. I don't remember if it was you with me, but he says, I don't want to fly a plane that's been fixed virtually. And I said, yeah, I think that one really hit home for me, that there's just going to be some of those careers where they're just going to be in person. And, it is about finding the right fit for online learning. I will say though, that, to your point, Pat, it's like the click culture. I wrote this in I was Higher Ed Digest the other day, and it said students now vote with a click, not with their feet. Isn't that the truth? Even if you could literally be on a campus as an undergraduate student and go, you know what, I don't like this, and while I'm here at the tail end of my class, I'm going to look up the college down the street on my phone and see if it's better fit for me. So they're voting and clicking all the time, which means we have to be timely and relevant and present. And that's what online learning is. But there are still detractors, Pat, that say online learning, distance learning, hybrid learning is just of lesser quality. And what an argument to have, but that still exists. And why does that exist even amidst widespread scalability of online learning?
Right. And some good data, so again, there's always some truth in data. And the K-12s not being as prepared, I think you'll certainly see some of that learning loss like we talked about. Had they been better prepared, I don't think the learning loss would have been as bad right there. And in the higher ed space, you do have to be in tune all the time, right? Because we are in a dynamically changing environment, and not dynamically like it's changing, every couple of years it's changing. It seems like it's almost changing daily. Yeah, right. We started discussing ChatGPT, right? How's that going to go and impact everything? It's going to throw stuff on its end, right? Schools that thought they had it nailed, and then all of a sudden you got an AI engine that's doing most of the work, or could do most of the work for your student. What do you do in those cases? So like you said, being in touch with your students all the time, right? Feedback, instant feedback, and as important, being able to make changes on the go, on the fly, that if you take a poll after an online class and 8 out of 10 of your students come up with a common thing that's wrong, you can't just put it in a bucket that a committee is going to look at in 6 months and decide upon, take action or not. You have to have some kind of real-time feedback, right? So that you can actually change before that student opens up smartphone and says, oh, there's the same open course down the street, I'm going to go and sign up for it.
So true. Douglas, do you have any closing questions before I give Pat the final two?
Yeah, I think the kind of building on what we've just talked about is, when, if ever, do you think that distance education, whether it be hybrid or online, will be as acceptable as anything else? And kind of, why I say that is, like, at one point the Socratic method was new too, right? Like, it's a long time ago. But like, innovation isn't always well received, but eventually, if it is as good as it can and should be, which I think very much it is and has that promise, eventually, the majority of people come around to it. Do you think we're at the tip of that? Do you think we're a ways away? Do you think it'll never happen? Just kind of curious.
Well, if you start looking at a global competitive environment, we've got to be as good as any other country in the world. Number one, put it up there, right? If you were just going to use that mode, we would probably, at some point, get rid of every instructor that's out there, and we would go to some AI-based robot, right? Like Sophia. Go look her up on YouTube, and you can go and see, even several years ago, she was getting pretty smart and looked like a real human being. Doesn't have health days, right? Maintenance is pretty minimal on him or her.
No sick days.
Artificial intelligence.
So yeah, the AI piece of it. And as you feed data into these instructors, they should be getting better and better and better. Now, will we ever get to that point? I'm not quite sure. There's a lot of political ramifications of that, right? I could see the teachers' unions already marching and protesting that this could never happen. But I will also say that those bots, call them what you want, they're going to need somebody there to feed them data and to program them, to give them some sense of humanness, human likeness. So there will always be, the jobs might switch around, but if we were going to stay competitive and be like the best out of any country that's out there, yeah, I do think that little by little, we have to have more and more of an online learning model component, but we also can't create a world of introverts, right? And you're going to have a hard time creating somebody who's not an introvert unless you get them socializing around human beings and not just staying online. And I mean, metaverse is great. It's got a lot of potential for the future, but you know, you're going to have to incorporate these human elements, because at the end of the day, we're all human. You need that human touch.
You know what I like about one thing that you said, and sometimes you talk to those that are not, to Douglas's question, you know, not fully invested in online learning, isn't there? You know, there's this I don't know, stigma that there's some guy in a dark basement with 5 computer screens around him running the Matrix and taking online courses, and in his mom's basement. You know, online learning looks more like depending on where you are, a 40-something-year-old struggling parent or single mom, or somebody who's in a professional career, upgrading that career, going home after work, getting online and trying to complete courses with 2 kids that are trying to get to sleep so that they can get up for school the next day. So, you know, there's a reality piece around online learning as we scale and it becomes widespread and adopted. You know, it gets rid of those old stigmas that, oh, it's online learning, it's a degree mill. Yeah, I've heard that before too. I hear that still now. And I'm like, seriously? You know, those days are kind of over. You know, there's accreditors. You ever heard of them? They accredit the same online programs and the same on-grown programs. Oh, by the way, it's institutional accreditation, not no modality-based education. So anyway, I get soapboxing on it, Pat.
It's a good point, and everybody learns at different paces, right, Joe? You know, some take a little bit longer. Some want on-demand content that they can go back and look at 2 or 3 times and kind of put it together. Then you got some kids that can get it once, right? First time, boom, they're breezing through it. But yeah, you do have to have that that balance in there. And heck, I'm an early version of the I guess the hybrid model, where I worked back when I was going through my first degrees, and I went to a program called co-op. And co-op was a manufacturer came to the area and they said, you know, hey, we're doing interviews at your college. And here's the program we have. It's called, you work 1 full semester at our place, and then you go back to school for a semester. Then you come back and work for a semester, and you go back to school for a semester. And we're going to pay your education while we go ahead and do this. So yeah, I was one of the fortunate ones that I did that. It is not for the faint of heart. It's not for everyone. You do have to put your mind to it. And you have to be willing to put in that extra effort. But at the end of the day, it was beautiful getting through my master's program and not having any debt when I graduated, and having a resume that was meaningful, and I learned stuff, right? I didn't just have knowledge from education. So you almost think about that model, right? Back before they truly had the online learning and stuff. But yeah, there's got to be components of flexibility, I guess, is the key right there, being flexible.
Well, we love it, Pat. Douglas, you speak. It looks like you're thinking. I don't know if it looks like you're thinking. You're waiting. I'm not sure.
Oh yeah, well, that model still exists today. Northeastern does an incredible job of that. They have a 5-year undergraduate where a big part of that is you're actually out. Like, my goodness, you're actually out in the workforce, putting your skills to work. So big shout out to Northeastern on that end, which I did not attend. That's not my alma mater, but they do a great job.
Awesome.
Well said, Douglas. I like that disclaimer too. Ladies and gentlemen, I got to give Pat the last 2 questions. And Pat, I want you to shout out, first of all, what did we miss about USDLA? Anything coming up? Anything going on? Your conference, obviously, I would say it again for everybody in the back that didn't hear you the first time. When's it happen and where is it? Anything else going on with USDLA? And of course, close us out with what you see as the future of higher education.
Yeah, you got it. So, one thing is we always are looking, we're a membership association, but we actually just came out with a prospect level free level of membership, which you get our weekly newsletter and you get to participate in our free Friday webinars, which we have several of them.
On a scale of 1 to 100, how free is it?
It's as free as 100%.
100%.
Thank you. I was trying to slide that in.
I muted myself, but I actually laughed pretty hard at
that. So that's great. And you can go out to USDLA.org website, and under membership, you can go sign up for that prospect level membership. And in there, you'll also, while you're on the website, you'll see events. And we have our 2023 conference, as I mentioned. It's at the Orlando Wyndham Resort, a fantastic place, right? It has one whole separate area for all of our meetings. We're going to have our keynotes in there. We're going to have our concurrent sessions, a lot of fun. Plus, it's a beautiful resort. Hotel has agreed to give us an incredible rate so that you can stay 3 days prior to the conference, 3 days after the conference. That's kind of nice.
Amazing.
Amazing. Get a little rest and relaxation pre or after the conference there. And the last thing on USDLA is that credentialing piece. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that. You know, we are getting more and more schools coming to us and asking, hey, you know, can you either help us with our online program, or can you at least audit our online program? Tell us the good, the bad, and the ugly for it. So we do have a way of doing that formally on the website under credentialing. And then the future, you know, I think we talked a lot about what could be possible, but, you know, AI is just going to make a huge difference in how we educate our students coming up. And we're just going to have to be clever on how we implement it into distance and online so that it doesn't feel like it was forced or rushed or, you know, brought upon us and just, you know, you got to do this. We've got to think about it in a meaningful way of how do we handle it. And at the end of the day, you have to measure the impact on the learning, the ultimate learning process and the learning results for our students, right? Are they getting out of school more prepared? That's the key, more prepared than they have been, you know, over the last decade or so.
Preparedness. That's what it's all about.
It is.
Right? If you're not prepared coming out of school, you're not going to be prepared to do the job. And then we're not going to be prepared as a society to move forward. That's what this podcast is all about, is how we move forward together in higher education. And somebody that always moves forward with me, of course, is my co-host, Douglas Carlson today. He's got a long title. It's a head of business development, partnerships, and strategy in an amazing company, and I mean amazing company called LeadSquared. Douglas, thanks for coming back again.
Oh, it's always a pleasure.
And of course, our guest, our star today, and I mean star, ladies and gentlemen, he's Pat Cassella. He's executive director of the United States Distance Learning Association. If there wasn't a more important job in this environment right now, I don't know what is than his. Pat, thanks for coming on the EdUp Experience today. Did you have a good time?
Great time, Joe and Douglas. You guys got a great show going on here, and thanks again for having me today.
Ladies and gentlemen, you've just EdUp'd. Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for some
amazing
news. It's time to work together to solve the puzzle of success in higher education. Ellucian Live returns to New Orleans from March 26th through 29th to help you unlock possibility for your institution. And yes, the EdUp Experience will be there recording live. Industry leaders from all across the world are converging to discover new insights, game-changing solutions, and powerful connections, all with the goal of addressing higher ed's greatest opportunities and biggest challenges. You do not want to miss Ellucian Live. Learn more and secure your seat today at elive.ellucian.com. It will be
amazing.
It's time to
level up.
The beginning of a new era in higher education begins with you. Order your copy of Commencement, The Beginning of a New Era in Higher Education by Kate Colbert, Dr. Joe Sallustio, with contributions by Elvin Freytes. It's higher education's must-read book of 2022. Discover how you can seize the moment to change higher education forever. Commencement, The Beginning of a New Era in Higher Education, now available on Amazon. For bulk orders, contact Kate, Joe, or Elvin